Good evening, everyone. Guten Abend. Wie geht's? Sehr gut? Yeah? That's all the German I know, but it's absolutely wonderful to be here, to be with you today, to speak in Regensburg, but also to speak to the TED community around the world. As was said, my name is Alvin Carpio, and I run a global community called the Fourth Group. We're a global community looking at the intersection between politics and technology. So we already know how much technology is impacting the way economies and societies work, but the big question is, how does politics respond? And this has come up to a number of big debates and issues, and today we're going to be talking about one of those. From the hilltops of ancient Greece, where we saw the birth of Western democracy, to the 17th century England, where we saw the genesis of political parties, from the birth of the United Nations after warring nations decided that they wanted to come together after the Second World War for peace and prosperity, and to the streets and neighborhoods in East London and small cities like Regensburg. Politicians have led many changes and achieved great things by leading communities, nations, and the world. Two of those people include some of my heroes. First one is Nelson Mandela, as we know, somebody who endured great sacrifices to fight against racism and apartheid in South Africa. Corazon Aquino, who in the Philippines fought a dictatorship using people power and overthrew that dictatorship. And of course, JFK, who was a person who had the vision and audacity to say we're going to land on the moon. Some of these politicians have inspired me, yourself, and many others around the world throughout history. But let's look at things today. It's not as rosy. Here is a graph which shows some of the most trustworthy professions. As you can guess, doctors are near the top. You will see that politicians are nowhere to be seen. Only 21% of people in this survey said they trusted politicians. Another one which is really interesting, this is more recent. Can you read that? 1 in 4 Brits who were surveyed said that robots and artificial intelligence could be more trusted than politicians. I mean, think about it. 26% of people have said they'd rather trust a machine than people who have been elected to office. So we wanted to really dig into that and what's really happening, and take it a step further and ask, if that's the case, could we replace politicians with robots and machines? A funny question it might seem. However, when you look at what's happening in the labor market currently, we're already seeing this. From the bricklayers to lawyers in law firms, and also driverless cars. We're seeing massive changes to the labor market, so much so that 250,000 jobs in the UK in terms of the public sector are threatened to be lost in the next few years. And in the US, all of 6% of all US jobs are looking to be automated by 2021. So be scared in a way, because AI could be coming for you. And no job is actually protected from that. So in order to do this, let's go into this. Let's have a little debate. So in order to see whether or not we can actually practically automate a politician, let's break it down into tasks that politicians are supposed to do. First one is around reaching out to voters during election time. Second one is around addressing problems, and the third is making really tough decisions on a daily basis. First one, reaching out to voters. One of the biggest ways that current politicians reach out to voters to win elections is by knocking on doors, going out to the streets and speaking to people directly. But what's interesting is that if a person were to run for Prime Minister in the UK and to speak to 60 million of those citizens, she would only have 2.4 seconds with each person in a whole 5 years. Not much time to really have a debate and find out what people want. We compare that to algorithms, which are capable of amassing huge amounts of data on a regular basis, real time, and which is able to make a pattern analysis and so forth. So much so that Facebook can know who you're going to vote for based on your likes. So I don't know if you know this, but actually, if you're a Bob Marley fan, any Bob Marley fans? Bob Marley fans, if you like Bob Marley on Facebook, you're more likely to be a Democrat in the US. Any country music fans? Well, if you like country music, you're more likely to be a Republican. And what's really fascinating is that our companies currently using this information on social media to create advertisements to every single person based on the Facebook likes. And this happened in the US, which helped the current president win his election. So already we're seeing artificial intelligence play a huge role in winning elections. The question is, could it automate a politician's task of doing so? Yes, it can. What for me is so amazing, though, is that we're already seeing the blurring of lines between technology and politics. This is Modi from India. Actually, if you look closely, you'll realize actually it's not Modi. This is a hologram of Modi. So Narendra Modi ran to be the Prime Minister of India, and he actually had holograms in multiple different places across the country, speaking to tens of thousands of voters who were effectively clapping and cheering for a figment of their imagination, literally a hologram. Imagine this, but actually replacing a human being with an AI who could look however you want it. It could look like yourself, it could look like somebody you really fancy, it could be the person of your dreams, effectively trying to use the information that they have on big data with a fictional character. All right, let's go into the second one. Second task that politicians are looking to do are around addressing problems. So in the UK, politicians run surgeries where they effectively address problems. Think of it like a doctor, but instead of going to see a doctor to talk about an illness or a injury you've had, you actually go to talk about the fact that there's a lack of school places for your kids, or the fact that crime has gone up, or the fact that you want something to be done to get benefits because you're really struggling. Question, can artificial intelligence do that job? Well, yes. You know what that is. And you've got also smartphones all in your pockets. Every day, millions of people speak to home devices, smart speakers, smartphones, asking Echo and Siri, can you tell me what the weather like, which finally it's looking really wonderful here, or can you order flowers because I forgot it's Valentine's Day and my girlfriend's going to be very angry the next day. Instead of that, why don't we repurpose that and say, let's have a type of device where you speak to it about your political issues around, as I said, education, unemployment, welfare. You could effectively use the information and data and devices that are available today and repackage that to be a politician AI. I'm going to give you a bonus one. I don't know if you can see this, but one thing I realized after working with politicians for a very long time is that politicians love to open up things, and they particularly like to cut ribbons to open up new buildings. So here's a bonus task. Here is a robot cutting ribbon, and a politician next to the robot really worried that he's going to take his job. I'm going to end on one other example, which is a bit more tougher. So the first three examples were kind of examples of things which are based on big data and analyzing, but actually making decisions. That's a totally different perspective and question. We already know that AI is capable of beating chess grand champions, and we also know that AI is able to beat Go champions. What's even more fascinating is the fact that these algorithms are being used, in this case in the financial sector, for a venture capital firm. So a venture capital firm, and this is a true story, appointed an algorithm on its board. So it had voting rights, it made decisions, and they trusted that AI with all of its financial capabilities to make choices about whether or not to invest in something. We're talking about a company who is putting trust. And so how about instead of looking at financial issues, why don't we think about political issues? Again, a very specific example. One of the big challenges that politicians have is around what to cut in terms of services if funds are low, or which policies to propose, whether it be in healthcare or in foreign policy. What you could effectively do is use algorithms and artificial intelligence to ask a different type of question, which is, if we do this policy, what is the likely outcome? If we do the other policy, what is the other likely outcome? And therefore play it out through modeling. Whether or not we can trust an algorithm to be part of the cabinet within a ministerial team is another question, but I'll leave that to you. What's fascinating is the fact that so much change is happening before our eyes, and we don't even realize it's actually happening. This is not science fiction. Last week, this is my friend Julia, and I was on Instagram last week scrolling through, trying to write this TED talk, and I see a photo of her, and it's actually her connected to a computer. So she's connected to the computer, and she's able to interact with the computer and so forth, and this is already happening today. So this is not science fiction. I mean, imagine you can almost have super politicians which are connected to all of the world's data and able to make decisions based on everything that you've posted on Facebook, which could be quite worrying. So yeah, the point is here is that this is happening, and there's a big question about what we want to do about it. So those are the 4 tasks: reaching out to voters, addressing problems, cutting ribbons, decision-making. These are 4 examples of tasks which politicians are doing on a regular basis, which can be automated. But when it comes to automation, and I'd like to end on this, the big question is not necessarily whether or not it's possible, it's whether or not it's ethically something that as humanity we want to do. So when you talk about the automation of jobs like bricklayers, like lawyers, like doctors, like drivers, and in this case politicians, do we need to take a step back and really think about the consequences for humanity based on this stuff? Or should we actually embrace it and take the opportunity and say, this is great, we are seeing improvements in society, economies, and politics because of this intermingling between technology and humanity? That, I guess, is probably one of the big questions of today, and there are many smart minds trying to answer that question. But I think for this case, it's going to take all of us in business, government, civil society, people like yourselves, to really answer this question as to whether or not we want to see this kind of world. And to also see the fact that when you augment humanity and technology together, you could probably see some amazing things. So yeah, I don't know if you will ever vote for a politician AI, but be warned. Thanks.